Hi everybody, David Mann here. I have been tasked to do a little bit of video presentation just to kind of recap what we did at the meeting today. Brianna is behind the camera. She of course has been taking notes which will be put into minutes and sent to you as soon as possible. So I'm going to try and go through things, but first of all, for those of you who were not able to attend the meeting today, just want to pass on Merry Christmas and greetings from everybody who did attend the meeting today. We missed you, and hopefully we'll see you next time. I've got notes here, so I just want to go through a little bit. First of all, we had a new member at the meeting today, Alvin Sanders, who joined us, and I'm sure will be has already proven to be a positive contributor to the discussion. There were 11 members of the committee present, which was just a quorum, which was nice because we could actually make a decision or two. First of all, we had a discussion around the confirmation of the principles of the, just trying to remind myself here of it. It's the principles, I can't find it here.
Community engagement.
Of community engagement, that's it. Community engagement, how can I forget that term? I hear it every day. So the principles of community engagement. It was a very brief discussion because it was all very positive around the work that was presented, and essentially we had consensus on that, and to take in those, and you'll find those, they were sent to you. By Dawn, who's leaving now. Bye, Dawn. So just have a look at those because basically everybody was in agreement with them. Then it was unanimous basically. We moved on to a discussion around the mission statement. Richard Wolf presented the results of the survey that was done online, which was quite interesting. There were about 50 people invited to take part in the survey. He got 29 responses, which is not a bad percentage. And the first of the two statements, which was definitely a winner in terms of the overall vote from the survey. But there was some discussion, quite a lively discussion over the use of certain words like create versus facilitate, whether comprehensive was required, and discussion about whether we are really setting ourselves up to build a plan or to actually execute that plan, or should the execution be a second part that is maybe recommended by this group. So there was lots of discussion around that, but in the end we did come to a consensus that the following would be the mission statement. The Theatre Engagement Project exists to create a plan that will fuel social engagement and relevance for theatre in the Metro Vancouver area, which was more or less statement number one on that survey, with just a couple of little tweaks. So memorize that, and then chew and swallow the piece of paper, and so you'll never lose it. We want to make sure that we start communicating some of this to the community in the next little while. Which brings us to the second major point of discussion that we had today, which was community engagement. And what's the next step, which is kind of more going away from the planning table here and moving into more of engagement with the community, more kind of an action rather than a discussion and planning. So recommendations were drafted by a committee involving Dawn, Sebastian, and Kathy, which was brought to the table. And so the idea is to now open up the discussion to bring in more feedback from the larger community. So the plan that was discussed had to do with creating opportunities for people to express their their opinions, their needs, their wants, whatever they feel need to be included in a discussion around the major pillars of this steering committee and process that we're going ahead with, which include art, relevance, public engagement, and infrastructure. So in practical terms, what was discussed was creating a few working groups, one of which would be a content group, which would be to create the questions that would be put to the community. And we kind of came to a consensus that we should try and develop approximately 3 questions that would apply to each of those 4 pillars. So each question would remain the same, but we would go, in terms of art, question number 1, question number 2, question number 3, and then get that kind of feedback from the community. So the first group to be created was to develop those questions. And so far that group includes Jay Dodge and myself, and he volunteered another person who will find out, I guess, that she has been volunteered. But certainly others would be welcome to join that group. And the same goes for the other groups that we're talking about, because the second part of that process would be holding a series of workshop discussions in the new year, kind of between late January and late March. We're talking about 3 events, one of which would be kind of similar to one we had last year, which was an invited group of artistic directors and general managers getting together to address the questions around these pillars. And so far, I think the group that is working on that includes Kathy, Brianne, Sebastian, and Claire. But again, others can join that group. Nope.
Sebastian is not on that group.
Sebastian is not on that group. Okay, well, those 3. So that kind of shifted around. And then there's also, there would be also 2 other workshops, one of which probably would be a daytime, kind of working time workshop, and the other one kind of an evening group, and this was Sebastian's suggestion, so I imagine he'll be working on this, would be, say, at a bar, something like that. So a different kind of social setting, something that would attract people who, say, work during the day, prefer to do something like this in the evening, be a casual setting. In all 3 cases, we would be just exploring those questions around those pillars and gathering as much feedback as possible. All this with kind of the intention of bringing that information to the Making a Scene conference in late April. So there will be some presentation included in the agenda for that conference, at which time we would hopefully be able to having gathered all that information, do some prioritizing with it and present that to the greater membership. The other group that would be involved is a marketing group, and that would be, they would be tasked with getting the word out, basically, about these workshops and what the questions may be, the statement that we came up with about, what our mission is, letting people know all about that so that we can get as many people out as possible for those 3 workshops. And that committee could certainly use people as well. So anybody who is on the steering committee that wants to take part in that, please do, make it known that you wish to be part. So that kind of brought us to the end of that part of the discussion, although we did then go on to a discussion about the 4 pillars themselves: art, relevance, public engagement, and infrastructure. There was a lot of discussion about whether certain words in that list were correct or were useful. Questions came up about relevance. What does that really mean? What does it cover? What does it say? As opposed to art, which is pretty clear, but obviously in the discussion, all of them were defined a little bit more clearly. art to include things like research and development, advancing the work and the practice of art, public engagement, which originally was communication and then got changed to public engagement, but still, includes a lot about communication, but also other forms of public engagement. And also an infrastructure, which interestingly had quite a few elements in it, such as human resources, space for work, advocacy, education, and even public engagement. There's a lot of crossover. So within those 4 pillars, there is a lot of potential crossover. So I'm sure we'll get information and feedback from people in those workshops that, where those 4 pillars begin to blend into 2 or 3 or 1. And the 5th pillar originally was governance, but basically that has become the steering committee. And so if anybody was aware of, that early on, it has kind of devolved away from this list. So we kind of left it with relevance still in the list. There was a lot of discussion about it. How do you measure relevance? Relevant to whom? Does it have to do with our role in strengthening communities, making connections? Diversity was certainly something that was one of the first things that pillar grew out of. So, questions are still open, but we are narrowing and moving forward and focusing on aiming towards some real action items to come out of the Making a Scene conference in April. So, hope you can be part of these discussions moving forward, and we'll see you next time.